Boston Dynamics robots are now doing parkour, and it is absolutely terrifying. Boston Dynamics was in the news earlier this year when South Korean automaker Hyundai acquired an 80% stake in the company from SoftBank, valuing the company at $1.1 billion. You remember Boston Dynamics had been bought by Google and then flipped because Google employees, I believe, were not stoked about military customers, especially not for robotics. I think that's un-American by the employees of Google who benefit from being Americans and protected by our military. For Google to not support our military, I think is, I wouldn't say treasonous, but I think it's quite un-American. I think if you're an American company and you benefit from this company and our military and the fine people who work in our military, you should build them the technology they need to protect your ass, because when things go down, you can be sure Google employees would want to be protected, and Google shareholders. I'm going to put that aside for a second because it is their right in America to not service the military. But on Tuesday, Boston Dynamics tweeted the following, along with a video of their robots doing, not kidding, parkour. Parkour is the perfect sandbox for the Atlas team to experiment with new behaviors through jumps, balance beams, and vaults. We push Atlas to its limits to discover the next generation of mobility, perception, and athletic intelligence. Wow. When you watch this video, and I'm playing it right now as we're talking, it is truly terrifying. You have this robot doing all kinds of jumps across boxes and tables and pieces of plywood that are angled very difficultly, maybe a 15-degree angle, and then doing backflips off of like really high roofs and balance beams. And then a second one comes and runs along the balance beam. This stuff is insane. The backflip, of course, is the best part. The dexterity is mind-boggling. One of them leaps over using its hand as a prop, the balance beam, and then they both turn around and do a backflip from basically double backflips from two robots in perfect unison. And the first one's off of a 3.5-foot desk onto a maybe an 18-inch box, and then off of that. And then they flex, pumping their fists. If you look at this, I don't know if you've seen the Terminator movies in a while, but I took my daughter to see Terminator 2. When the pandemic ended, they were playing some, because they were out of movies, they were playing some classic movies. I went to the theater, literally, I kid you not, we were two of two people in the theater, and we saw Terminator 2. And they're walking across basically a war-torn city, I think it's Los Angeles, and they're walking across debris and rubble of buildings. It's less challenging than what those robots just did. The only difference is those robots aren't holding guns. And you can be certain that robots can hold guns, and you can be certain that certain military organizations have robots today holding guns. Now, Google and Boston Dynamics might not be willing to do that for our government, but I am certain that South Korea's government bought Boston Dynamics so that they can have these robots holding guns, because they have North Korea ready to basically cross the border and annihilate them with a crazy leader at any point in time. And I don't blame the South Koreans. They should have bought Boston Dynamics. They should put guns on these things. If I was living there and I had North Korea as my neighbor, I would want a million of these robots on the border ready to go. If you think this through, you can go onto the YouTube and you can find different folks playing with their drones and putting paintball guns on, etc. I think this is the future of the military, not just drones that are airplanes, like the small quadcopter drones. Here is a TCAD drone. This is made by Duke Robotics, and it is a remotely operated firing-enabled drone developed for the U.S. military. Now, this looks pretty janky, but it's obviously going to work. They just strapped it looks a military rifle onto the bottom of this drone. They didn't make a purpose-made gun, it looks like. This is just a gun floating in the air, shooting at people. This is going to end a skirmish pretty quick. If we had these with the Taliban in Afghanistan, I think we would be able to put up a heck of a resistance. I think they would have run for the hills if we didn't have to send troops in, and we sent this in. In an article by Design Boom, they say the robot is adapting its behavior based on what it sees by repeating the parkour exercises. By this, no pre-programming of all possible motions is required, but instead, the team defined a smaller set of behavior templates that can be related to the environment. This is a fancy way of saying that this robot hasn't exactly been programmed to do that course. That would be one level of impressive. That's saying they taught the robot heuristics, basic rules, and how to navigate them. So if you were to go into that course and move stuff around and say to the robot, run around, the concept here is it would be able to adapt and do it, which anybody who owns a commercial drone knows, because when the drones land or when they are going to fly into a tree, they have avoidance systems. Now, they're not completely intelligent. You can't just talk to your commercial drone and say, hey, go fly, find somebody, shoot them, and come back. And if it can be built with today's technology fairly easily, that means the military has this already. Here's a quadcopter. It's got a gun on it. Here are, if you remember from the Iraqi war, we had the deck of cards with all the bad guys on it. They can just put the deck of cards in there, do facial recognition. You see the person, headshot, done. That's coming, folks. And this is the world we live in. Okay, if this has been too dystopian for you, some good news. Disney is getting into sentient robots. Westworld is coming, hopefully without the same outcome. Teams today need a central hub for their information and work more than ever, especially in a world of remote work. That's where Notion comes in. It's one place for your notes, your documents, your projects, and everyday work that goes well beyond a wiki. So when we went fully remote in March of 2020 here at launch and This Week in Startups, Notion became our internal knowledge bank. Look at the video here while one of my producers goes through our Pod Notes page on Notion, where we highlight the top lessons from every episode. We also put the ad copy that I'm reading in Notion right now. How meta is that? Additionally, all of the investments we do, we will put videos, we'll put our due diligence, everything is on Notion. As I tell people, when you're talking to me about a project, I want a Notion page. Notion is the one place where every team, from engineering to sales, can work together seamlessly with 500 integrated apps, including Google and Slack, which we have integrated, and it works great. Hundreds of thousands of teams worldwide are already delighting their employees with Notion. Plus, Notion has a worldwide community of millions of users creating templates and tutorials, so the product is continually improving. So you go to notion.so. That's right, Notion. And use the promo code TWIST. You're going to get $250 off their annual team plan. Think about that, $250. It's an incredibly generous offer. If you don't have Notion, you're wasting so much time. I love the product. Congratulations to the team there. I am addicted to Notion. Okay, let's get back to this episode.